Her posts popped up to me a few weeks ago, and I saw that she had done a post about her husband having cancer, and I did not know that.
Well,
but it was a very vague post, and she didn't give an update. And then I had to click on her account because I was like, what's happening? Is he okay?
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Hello, welcome to This Week in Mormons, the Twin Sisters edition, with sisters and hosts Ariane Smith
and Tiffany Hales.
We're back. We were only on 2 weeks ago, but this is just how everything fell in the month of June.
Exactly. Exactly. I have a special taffy guest, and she could not. Normally, this would be a taffy week for me. This week did not work out for her, so she's going to come at the end of the month. And so I asked you. I said, "Hey, you want to? I know it's only been 2 weeks, but you want to record again?" And you jumped at the chance.
Of course. So here we are. Summer is here.
Summer's here. School is out.
Sticky floor season is well upon us.
See, you have sticky floor season at your house. My house right now, I have dirt floor season.
Yes. Tell everyone why you have a dirt floor season.
Not that I technically don't have a dirt floor in my house. I actually have tile in my house, but the tile in my house is currently covered with dirt.
With a fine layer of dust.
So about 6 weeks ago, my husband and I started this project to, we were just going to do some yard maintenance. It had been 13 years since we'd purchased our house. When we purchased the house, it was a short sale and it had been vacant for like a year and a half. The landscaping was just out of control when we purchased it. And we just kind of like trimmed some stuff back. And then over the course of the last 13 years, we've gone through raising 6 kids. We had 6 kids in the house when we bought this house. And over the last 13 years, they have all aged out. And so now we have been repairing the damage. 2 years ago, we did the interior. This year, we were like, okay, we're going to get our pond going. So we got the pond going, and then it required us to rip out all the landscaping around the pond because it looked awful and put grass in. And then it required us to rip out more landscaping and replace some landscaping. And our grass was a hot mess and trees needed to be removed.
Jumped down the rabbit hole, and you might never come out.
I really might never come out. I have to tell you what happened yesterday. So we had to, my husband has literally done 32 trips to the dump. And I am not kidding with the amount of stuff we have pulled out of our yard, whether it's like bushes and landscaping we've pulled out or trees we've trimmed up. And then we had to work on our sprinkler system. We have so many trees in our yard. Our sprinkler system was all like completely root bound. So we got our sprinkler system done, and then we hauled in. I don't even want to know how much topsoil we hauled in. Yards and yards and yards of topsoil. Hauled the topsoil in, got the topsoil down. So we're getting ready we're going to do a mixture of both grass seed and sod. Some areas of our yard will get sod, and some areas will get grass seed. So we're ready to do that yesterday. We get 1 load of sod. We do sod in one area of our yard. And then a landscaping guy came over to give us an estimate on concrete curbing. And he said, he saw what we were doing. He said, you really need to take that tree out if you want your grass to grow.
Of course you do.
Then our neighbor came over and he said to my husband, Darren, if you want your grass to grow, you really need to take that tree out. And so Darren pulls me out of my office. I'm working from home yesterday at 4:00 in the afternoon. He says, come outside for a minute. And I come outside. He's like, well, the landscaper says we need to take the tree down. The neighbor says we need to take the tree down. What do you think? And I start assessing the situation. I'm like, the tree needs to go down.
And at this point, you've already ripped out massive quantities of trees and bushes.
Yes.
And you're like, 1 more tree, only it's like the mother load of trees.
Well, it was
like the biggest one in your yard.
It was one of the biggest one in our yard. It was a pine tree. It drops all sorts of crap all the time. So I'm like, well, just to have that tree gone and not drop needles and pine cones will be delightful.
Worth it.
Plus it really opens it up, and it's going to give my yard a lot more shade. So the grass will grow, yet I still have plenty of trees to have evening shade. So I'm not out there in the sun. And so my husband, he and the boys took off some of the lower branches yesterday. Today they went and got one of those like lift things, and they took this tree down. They counted the rings. 36 rings. This was a 36-year-old tree.
That was a very old tree.
I think it was original to the house.
Wow. So no wonder it was so big.
Now we have the tree down. So we can hopefully get our grass in, because 3 weeks from today is the 4th of July. I am roasting, or rather my husband is cooking a pig.
It's pig round 2.
It's pig round 2.
And I'm coming.
And you're coming.
I want to be there to witness this time.
Yes. And so in 3 weeks, I'm having, I don't know how many people at my house. I mean, because we're inviting friends, neighbors, just people we know. I mean, I just don't even know how many people are going to, there's going to be a lot of people. We're easily pushing 100.
So I should bring my own chair. Is that what
you're telling me? The invitations that will go out will say, bring your own chair, bring your own beverage, and bring a side dish to share. Okay. Everything else will be provided.
Got it.
So anyway.
And then I said to you, when I heard about all of this, I was like, great. Does this mean in the future, when my daughters get married, we can do receptions in your yard?
And I said, absolutely. Because first of all, I've got a functioning pond, and this pond is huge. This isn't a little pond. This pond is literally the size of a swimming pool, and it has koi fish in it now, and we're getting it cleaned up, and the waterfall's going, and it will be easily wedding reception ready.
I know. Not that that will be happening for me anytime soon.
Yes.
I would hope.
I would hope too. I've met your children. I know how old they are. I would be concerned if we were looking at this.
But I'm glad you're getting your yard ready for me.
It's going to be gorgeous. Anyway, so yes, that is what has consumed my summer so far.
Fun.
So what about you?
Oh, we've just been summering. It's so interesting. I'm at this point in my kids' lives where I'm going to have 2 in high school next year and 2 in elementary. This is like the one year we don't have anybody in middle school. And so we're so divided this summer between the big girls and the little kids.
Oh.
The little kids are living a totally separate life from the big girls.
Oh dear.
My older girls are just like so busy.
Yeah.
So busy.
Doing the teenage thing.
Nobody ever told me how busy summer is when you have high schoolers. Like their stuff doesn't stop.
No.
It's like year-round activities and things. So they are just ships passing in the night, and I'm at the park with the little kids living that wonderful little kid life.
Which is kind of nice.
It is nice. I'm glad I just still have some that are little to hold on to, but my older girls are having a great time doing all their summer things.
That's very cool.
Yeah, jobs and FSYs and camps and school activities. So there's a lot going on.
Okay. Well, we're here tonight to do some news, and I'm just looking. Did you accidentally take the first story? Because I don't have it here.
I didn't see a printout for one.
Well, I
think you're going to just have to.
I put it over there.
There it is.
Okay, there we go. All right. So let's start off with some news tonight. I need to correct something from last week's episode. Not our episode. This is the episode Matt and Melissa did. So they talked about President Nelson's 100th birthday that is coming up and his challenge to social media. And they just said, he just says go do something nice for somebody. And I'm like, did you read the article? That is not what President Nelson said. They did not do this story justice. So normally I try not to go back and revisit other post stories.
Tiffany was very passionate about this one.
I was very passionate about this one.
Us to get the facts straight.
And I was a little less than happy with their coverage of it. So I'm circling back. So, because I just thought what President Nelson did was so cool. It needed more than he says do something nice. I'm like, that was not the point of his message. So, June 1st, he releases a social media post and he says, it is 100 days until my 100th birthday, which
is wild.
It's totally wild.
And we thought he'd make it to 100, but here we are.
Yes. And
we didn't know.
We didn't know. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that he does. I think he's hanging in there. I almost wonder if he's hanging in there for the Salt Lake Temple. And that won't be done until 2026. We have an article coming up about that a little later in the show. So can he make it to 102?
I hope so.
I hope so too. Anyway, so he releases this post on social media and he said, he turns to the scriptures because he's President Nelson. That's what he does. He says, one of the places where the Savior used the number 100 in the scriptures was in the parable of the lost sheep. And he says, though 99 of his flock were safely by his side, the shepherd went in search of the one who was lost. And President Nelson goes on to say, look, I don't need any physical gifts. There is nothing physically in my life that I'm in need of, but I do want a spiritual offering. And he said, one thing that would brighten my day is for each of us to reach out to the one in our lives who may be feeling lost and alone. And then he gives 3 questions. He says, ponder these 3 questions and take these questions to the Lord. And I loved this. So his first question is, who do you know that may be discouraged? His second question is, who might you need to reconcile with or ask for forgiveness? His third question, has one name been on your mind lately, though you haven't quite known why? And he says, take one of those 3 questions to the Lord, and he will inspire you to know how to reach out and lift one who needs help. I just thought that was so cool.
It made it so personal.
It did.
Like, not only do I want you to do something nice, I want you to really think about who you're going to do
exactly.
it for, and in what way,
and ponder it. And he concluded his social media post. I love this hashtag 99+1 was his hashtag. So
very clever.
I know. So I was just thinking, wouldn't that be really cool? I mean, he didn't say do this, but wouldn't it be really cool if people, I mean, and you don't necessarily want to brag on the things that you did, but maybe do
I know they will
put something on Facebook that says, hey, I reached out to the one today. 99+1.
I'm sure they'll get stories coming in, and some of those will be read at conference.
Yeah.
Like there will be some talk of this, I'm sure. Yeah. There usually is. So
anyway, I just loved his message, his birthday request to the saints. I thought it was awesome.
Okay. All right. The next story is about a donation from the church. The church donates a combined $55.8 million to help women and children across the world. This was really cool. This funding is a collaboration. The church is collaborating with 8 international nonprofit organizations to mostly help with women and children's health and nutrition in 12 high-need countries. So they talked about how many children are in need of food and nutrition across the world. I mean, it's millions. And
you read the statistics and it is so sad.
It is sad.
It's heartbreaking.
We totally forget how privileged we are until we read stuff like this and are reminded like, oh, majority of the world
does not have the resources and the things that we take for granted every day.
Yeah. So it says they're trying to reach 12 million children under age 5. And 2.7 million expectant new mothers in these various countries. Some of the countries are Cambodia, Dominican Republic of Congo, Ghana, Kenya, Mali, Nepal, Nigeria, Philippines, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Zambia, and Bangladesh. So those are kind of the countries that these different charities that they're working with have honed in on. I love the quote from President Johnson. Camille Johnson, our Relief Society president, said, when you bless a woman, you bless a family, a community, a nation. When you bless a child, you invest in the future. So it's just really cool. It listed the organizations they're working with. I love it when they work with organizations that are already established.
Exactly.
It's so smart. It is the best way to spend our money. We don't need to be reinventing the wheel. There are people out there that do this. We just need to give them money.
And they screen very well for the organizations that they choose to give money to and that are using resources wisely and are being effective.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing too that kind of struck me about the article is, of course, they had quotes in there from all 3 members of the General Relief Society presidency. And their quotes are taken from various places in the world where these women have traveled.
Right.
And you know, it seems to me, at least when I was growing up, you had the General Relief Society presidency and you had, the members of the 12 and the 70 and it seemed like the men traveled, but you never really heard about the women traveling. You didn't hear about the General Primary Presidency traveling, the Relief Society presidency traveling, Young Women's. You just kind of thought that they were all hanging out in the Relief Society building at what I lovingly call One Church Plaza.
Right.
those women, I think, from what I have been able to tell, they keep a travel schedule that is just as demanding as the quorum of the 12. I mean, maybe not just as demanding, but I mean, they're speaking, they're visiting all of these countries. Their calling is literally a full-time job for them.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm so curious about, I mean, the article kind of made it sound like this was a passion project for them personally. Yes. So I'm really curious about, I guess, just how much discretion they get to use in funding. Like, are they given a budget? Are they just part of a committee that gets to make suggestions? I would just love to know the inner workings. Like, how does this work? Like, is it like, okay, Relief Society, you get to choose how to spend this much per year? Or is it like, no, you're sitting on this committee of
and the committee
however
chooses.
Many people, and you have to like duke it out with them. Like, if you want something, you gotta fight for it. Like, you know, not fight. They're all representing good causes. It's
exactly.
But I'm just so curious how that works.
I know. I didn't think about that. I was too enthralled with, man, those ladies got a lot of frequent flyer miles.
I know. But I think that's great because as they do get around, they do see the needs.
Exactly.
And I'm sure they go back to Salt Lake and say, this is what we want to do. Like,
well, and then as they visit with church members throughout the world, because everywhere they go, I think they're doing 2 or 3 different things. For example, Kristen Yee, who is I think the second counselor in the General Relief Society presidency, she was here for the YSA conference that we had in Boise here a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And she spoke to the YSA kids, but then the next day
she did a fireside.
And
I didn't go. Did you go?
It would conflicted with my schedule, so I didn't go. But so I think anytime they travel, they try and make the most of where they're at to speak at several different events, maybe go visit with several different people. And I think doing that throughout the world must give them an incredible perspective as to the saints in different countries and help them in their callings as they are providing leadership for a worldwide church, not just a church located in the Mormon belt.
Right. Keeps that perspective.
Yeah, keeps that perspective. So, speaking of female church leaders, we are going to talk about Emily Bell Freeman.
Oh,
we love her.
The Instagram famous Sister Freeman.
And her wardrobe. Her wardrobe since becoming Young Women's president has not changed and has not disappointed.
You know what? You're right. I hadn't noticed
She's
that.
She's always known for wearing these like bright colors. She
does still wear all the bright colors.
She wears all the bright colors. She did not get the pastel suit memo, nor did she get the football helmet hair. And so I love that about Sister Freeman. And the picture associated with this article, she was speaking at the MTC to missionaries. And the picture associated with this article, she is wearing this vibrant floral dress that I took one look at and I was like, oh, I would so have that in my closet. So anyway, so she recently spoke with missionaries at the Missionary Training Center. And this was just a couple days ago on Tuesday, June 11th. And she brings with her these rocks. And she says, I gathered these rocks from a brook at the edge of a field where David battled Goliath during a trip that she had to Israel. And I was like, ooh, were you allowed to do that? But okay. Anyway, and so she says when David faced a battle, he chose to use stones because he trusted them. And she said, for me, I trust the scriptures, and that's where I go for direction and comfort. And so she does this whole thing talking about studying the scriptures. And she said, so if scripture study doesn't come easy right now, practice. President Freeman invited. When you come to a verse that is meaningful to you, mark it as a friend. And I really loved that because I would have to say one of my weakest areas is I really do not enjoy studying the scriptures. I've never studied them long enough or hard enough to get to the point where I'm like, ooh, I love the scriptures. It still seems like drudgery and it still seems really hard.
Also, I'm not a scriptorian. But some people that just comes so easily and naturally too.
Yes.
And others, it
doesn't.
I mean, I've never been a great reader in general. You're a good reader because you're an attorney.
Yeah, but you know what?
But that probably makes it harder.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to read it.
Because I read all day. The last thing I want to do for fun is read. I do. I read so much during the day. I'm like, no. I don't want to read.
Yeah.
So, but she is such a scriptorian, and I've heard her give several talks where she is just talking about her love of the scriptures.
Yeah.
And it just makes me go, well, I really admire President Freeman. Maybe I had to give a crack at this. So she tells the missionaries, she gives them 7 different suggestions for studying the scriptures, like define your difficult matter and write it down. Read passage after passage of scripture. Use the topical guide for footnotes. Ponder. Just a whole bunch of like really, really good suggestions. Now, the other cool thing about this speaking assignment is not only did the missionaries get to hear from Sister Freeman or President Freeman, they got to hear from Brother Gregory Freeman, who is her husband.
I know. I thought that
Which
was interesting.
I loved that because
we hear about the wives of general authorities speaking
Exactly.
quite a bit, but I don't think I've ever thought about the reverse of that.
I know. Well, the reverse of that was true. And I was very interested to hear from him. I follow her on Instagram. And if you follow her on Instagram, she has discussed recently that her husband was diagnosed with cancer.
I saw this a few weeks ago. I don't follow her, but her stuff pops up quite a bit for me because, you know, Instagram knows who I am.
Yes.
They know all the personal details of my life.
Thank you.
And they feed me the things they think I want to see, and they're very accurate. Anyway, her posts popped up to me a few weeks ago, and I saw that she had done a post about her husband having cancer, and I did not know that.
Well,
but it was a very vague post, and she didn't give an update. And then I had to click on her account because I was like, what's happening? Is he okay? And there was no update, and I was very mad. I'm sorry. If you are going to post that your husband has cancer and you're a public figure, don't leave us hanging. Is he okay?
Exactly.
Do you know?
Well, I'm coming to that. Okay.
Because I've been wondering.
Not only did she post that he had cancer, she never said what type of cancer.
No, it was like a hospital bed picture.
Yes.
It was very vague.
It was very vague. And, you know, and there is a whole variety of cancers. There are cancers that are very serious, and there are cancers that are less serious. And I mean, clearly this was serious. He'd spent a number of days in the hospital, but he gets up and he talks to the missionaries, and he tells the missionaries, the Lord will bless their afflictions for their gain. And he said, this is something he's experiencing. He's been experiencing since recently. He had been diagnosed with cancer. And he said he underwent a major surgery to remove his esophagus, spending several days in the hospital. So it must have been esophageal cancer. I think that's how it's pronounced. I don't know anything about that.
I don't know. That's not one I've heard much about.
It's not one I've heard much about either. But
he's okay for now.
He's speaking at the MTC.
Is he done with? Did he talk about treatments?
He does not talk about treatments, but he does say this, and I loved this because I think anybody who has gone through any sort of trial, especially a big one, can testify to this. He says, I want you to know in the last 30 days, I have felt him more than I have in my whole life. May you, as you serve him, come to know who he is in your good times and in those times you have affliction. And I loved that. And then President Freeman goes on and she talks about since her husband's diagnosis, they have been searching the scriptures to learn more about healing because there's all sorts of information in the scriptures about healing. And she said, as they've studied this word, different words, phrases, and some impressions and promptings have come. And she said, you may start with healing, but it may lead you to better understand about faith. And then the process starts all over again. And anyway, it was a great talk, I think, from what I can see for these missionaries. And she just had so many nuggets of just really good wisdom in this talk that apply to all of us, not just young missionaries headed out in the mission field.
She's a good speaker.
She
brought props.
Exactly.
It showed a picture of her with the shoes. Did you see the picture of the shoes? They were her son's shoes from his mission, and he wore holes in them. And there was a picture of her sticking her finger through the hole in the bottom of his shoes. And she was showing it to like encourage them to just like, don't waste any moments. This is like your one shot on your mission. Just work your hardest, do your best.
And that's
kind
what
of
she
thing.
said. Is she said, keep back nothing, give everything to this experience. And that was the point of her son's shoes, is he gave everything to the experience, so much so he came home with holes.
I like a prop in a talk.
I
I know we're
she
not
bought
supposed to do
2
that
props.
in sacrament meeting,
She
but I
brought-
like a prop.
I know she brought the rocks and the shoes. I
Yes.
agree, because it just engages another one of your senses, and the more
And
of your
I'm a
senses,
visual person.
Yes, so am I. The more of your senses you can engage, the more you're going to recall the message.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. We are circling back to hymns.
because we love the hymns.
We talked about the hymns a couple weeks ago. We were all abuzz about the new release. So this is a new article by Tad Walsh in Deseret News, right? He's a Deseret News.
Well,
writer?
he does Deseret News, and he also does Church News. But I think this was a Deseret News article.
Okay. So he was talking about the new hymns in the hymn book and why it's taken so long. And he did an interview.
Well, there was a press conference, and he
Right.
went to the press conference.
He went to the press conference, and this is like some of additional information that he got out of the people at the press conference. So one of the things, there were a couple interesting tidbits. First one was that copyright issues. This is something I had not even thought about. I mean, everybody's wondering why it takes so long. And part of why it takes so long is, 17,000 hymns came in that they had to sort through. And there were like 150 people throughout this committee at various and assorted times.
But the interesting thing was every hymn that was submitted, you had to sign the copyrights away.
Yes. So that was what was interesting. He talked about copyright issues, and he said you would think that would be what the holdup was, right? Because that's a lot of copyright issues. But he said that is not the holdup at all for these newer ones.
Yeah.
Because when people submitted them, they signed the copyrights. So not an issue. And then he said for some of the older ones, they are old enough that they're not protected by copyright law. So copyright is actually getting easier the older our hymn book goes.
The older our hymns get.
And the new ones that we get.
And they were really smart, I think, to do that with the new hymns, to say you want to submit, we get the copyrights.
Right. Like up front.
Yeah.
Not negotiable. So
non-negotiable.
I thought that was interesting. And then he talked about how long it took to translate the last hymn book into different languages. It was released in 1985, and it took them 37 years to get it translated into 45 different languages. And the last one was Mongolian, and that just finished in December of 2022.
Yeah.
So he's actually saying that to get 50 languages by 2030, which is the plan now, that's like highly accelerated pace.
Well, I would assume that the hymns that we are keeping from the old hymn book that have already been translated,
that will help.
Those
will be done. Also, I would assume with AI and stuff, it's only going to get easier, right? But I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. I'm not musical. Maybe they can't use that.
Well, and what they were saying is, because these hymns are, the words are essentially poetry, the way poetry translates in one language doesn't necessarily translate the same way in another language. And you have to make sure the meaning is the same.
It goes with the tune and all that. Yeah. So, but this I thought was super interesting. After the 1985 hymn book came out, they discovered that the font that was used was very difficult for people with dyslexia and poor eyesight.
Who knew?
Never would have thought about the font. The font is Palatino.
Are you familiar with the Palatino font?
I have heard the name Palatino
because you are a font girl.
I do like fonts. Typography is so fascinating to me. That's why I was so interested in this.
I know.
So it's why
I picked it for you.
Thank you. So apparently it just was really difficult on eyesight. So with this new book, they are designing a new font, and a font specifically designed for the new book. They're not using any old font they're picking out in Word. Like they're designing one.
Well, and did you know that, this isn't the first font they have designed.
I didn't know that.
Every font they design for church use is named after, for lack of a better term, a dead president, meaning a dead president of the church.
So apparently their other fonts they've designed all have names. Now I'm like, I want a flip book of all the fonts the
I do
church has
too.
designed and the names.
Exactly.
That would just be fun to look at.
Exactly. How do we get our hands on
Who
that?
do we know on the inside?
I wonder if Kurt
Frankham.
Kurt, do you know how we can get our hands?
We just are curious.
We want to just see the
We're
fonts.
not going to steal your fonts,
No,
church.
no.
I'm sure you have copyrights on those.
Exactly.
We just want a flip book.
We want a flip book. We want to see the fonts, and we want to
We
see.
want to see the fonts and the names.
And I should say they're not named after dead presidents. They're named after prophets. Okay, that's
prophets.
probably a little more
So, yeah.
respectful.
So the font for the new hymn book is McKay New, after McKay.
Yes,
Daybell
new
McKay.
spelled N-E-U-E.
as you do in
new
fontage. So it has a larger letter height on the X and all the other letters. So you will be able to see it better. It's just going to be larger, I think, and clearer, more defined lines, easier to see for people struggling with eyesight or dyslexia. So
Now I have to pull it up. I'm going to have to pull it up on the new app and see if it
Oh.
looks different on the new app.
would the font be? It should be,
Let's
right?
Let's look and see if the.
Okay, well, you do that. We have to report on. We're 2 weeks out now
Okay.
for hymns. So
Yes.
you put a poll on the Facebook page.
I did put a
and
poll
you
on
said,
the Facebook page.
leave your comment. Did your ward sing the new hymns?
Yes.
And we were shocked because we were predicting 99% of wards will be singing new hymns on Sunday.
Yes.
No, they were not that first Sunday because we forgot to factor in, probably because we're not musical people.
Yes.
There are ward organists that have not had time to practice these hymns.
Mm.
And programs have been printed. They released these on like a Wednesday before church. People were not ready to drop everything
No.
and squeeze in the new hymns that first week.
Although some wards did.
Some wards did.
I
I
had it on good authority that a ward over in Nampa that our friend, our twin listener friend, Kristen, who I think is going to come on in August on Taffy, her ward did 3 new hymns
they
the
went
first
all
Sunday.
in.
They went all in.
They went all in.
They must have a really good organist.
Okay, so my ward didn't the first Sunday. Your
Uh-huh.
ward didn't the first Sunday.
They didn't do the hymns, but our organist used one of the new
Prelude.
hymns for a prelude.
Okay, so last Sunday was the second Sunday. Our ward, the choir sang "It Is Well With My Soul."
Oh.
And they sang the first 2 verses, and the congregation sang the last 2 verses with them.
Yes.
And it was
very cool.
beautiful. I loved it.
Oh.
So that was our first introduction. Did you guys sing one this
No.
last week? What? You
I
have
know.
not gotten on board yet?
Well, that first Sunday,
Uh-huh.
that evening, I happened to be out on a walk, and I ran into our word music person, and I said, she didn't even know. I don't think she knew that there were new hymns out. I was like, "Oh yeah, there's some new hymns." I said, "You need to go listen to the podcast, and you need to get some new hymns incorporated." So I'm hoping that will happen
maybe
shortly.
this week will be your week.
Well, I know she picks them several weeks in
Yeah.
advance, so I don't know if she really wants to change it up.
Although we're getting close to patriotic territory here.
We are.
And this might be our last chance to sing those patriotic hymns. I know we say that every year.
We'd say that every
This
year.
is the last chance.
Last chance. Okay, so I pulled up the first new hymn, which is "Come Thou Font,"
Okay.
and it definitely looks like it is a different font.
Yeah, it does. It is nice and clear.
It is very clear. It is much easier to read. I'm going to have to say kudos and mad props to McKay New.
Yeah.
I like the McKay New font.
It's a good font.
It's
a
great.
classic, clean, good font.
I would like to. I would like to use this font in my everyday typing. I kind of
Well-
doubt the church is going to let me.
I don't think you're going to get access to that, my dear.
You don't think it'll show up in my Word of font choices I can have? Because it is a very lovely, lovely font.
It is a nice font.
I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to give them mad props. I would use this font totally.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, there you go.
All right.
Okay, what's
We had
next?
a great article in the Salt Lake Tribune,
this
and
was
you listened
so
to the
good.
accompanying podcast.
Yes, this was a Tribune article, but they also did a podcast. It started as a podcast. They turned it into an article. They interviewed a man who is writing a book. Well, he's written a book on the church and the lift of the priesthood ban in 1979.
46 years ago, June 9th.
46 years ago is the anniversary. So this guy's name is Matthew Harris. He is a historian. I think he's associated with Colorado State University, Pueblo. He's a history professor, and he has written a new book on a lot of the inside workings of how that went down, the key players. He has gotten access. How he wrote this book was he was able to, he's studied this for years and years
Yes.
and years. I think he's cozied up to the families of the key players. And so he took a lot of this from notes and journals
And papers.
From some of the key players, President Kimball, McKay, interviews with family members, all of that. So this was so interesting. I think everybody should go listen to this podcast.
I haven't listened to the podcast yet. It's on my list.
And the article is
just
fascinating. Word for word, the interview that they did on the podcast. So it's on the Mormon Land podcast from earlier this week, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, so go listen to it.
Hit some of the highlights because we need to discuss this. This is fascinating.
Yes. Okay. Some of the highlights. So some of the highlights are that, this was leading up for many years. When David O. McKay was the prophet, they were on the cusp of making this change because they had announced that there would be a temple built in Brazil. So that was going to be problematic for them because there were a lot of international members in Brazil, and they were really kind of making this push. This is when the church really started to push into we're expanding worldwide. Mm-hmm. We're going to be all over the world. And so this was causing obviously a lot of problems. It was already causing problems for members here, but they began to see, I think, the writing on the wall, how are we going to do this? So Hugh B. Brown,
this is my favorite part of the story, what Hugh B. Brown did, because you would never get away with this today.
This is amazing. And I just had never heard this. I
know
I've heard bits and pieces of this throughout the years. I knew that there were holdouts in the Quorum of the 12, and I'd heard that, and I'd heard that Hugh B. Brown was an advocate for it, but I never heard the tiny details about how this went down. And this is so interesting. So Hugh B. Brown was in the first presidency, called to the first presidency in the early 60s. And he was adamantly against the priesthood ban from very early on. He just did not think it was compatible with the scriptures and what, our Heavenly Father would want. He's like, this is not adding up. So for years, he is trying to convince other people. And so he was very nervous because Joseph Fielding Smith was next in line to be the church president.
And then Harold B. Lee
and then Harold B. Lee. And they both, he was like, oh, it's not going to get done with these two because they were hardcore, old school, this is doctrine kind of thinkers on this. And so Hugh B. Brown is just working behind the scenes to try to get this done. So he did a couple of things. When David O. McKay was the prophet, he just kept trying to talk him into it. And David O. McKay kept saying, we need a consensus. He was leaning towards it. He wanted to do it. But it was this consensus thing, which I think is so interesting because we've heard this recently.
Yes.
And I'm like, has it always been that way that they needed a consensus?
It's from the beginning. They always have to. Everybody has to come around, and they always have to agree.
It is fascinating to me. I guess it shows you the difference in personalities. It's fascinating to me that if a prophet is in the room saying, "I think we should do this," it just seems like everybody would be like, yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine sitting in a room with the prophet and being like, actually, I don't think so.
We ought to think about this some more.
But anyways,
the other thing that Hugh B. Brown did is in 1962. So this is more than 10 years before the ban is lifted.
Right.
He goes rogue and reaches out to a reporter from the New York Times and says, hey, we're thinking about lifting the ban.
Yeah. So he plants the story because he knows that will put pressure on the church.
Exactly.
And he has tried, I think he's at his wit's end at this point. He has tried and tried. And so he even went to David O. McKay's sons. He set up a meeting with them to convince them, you've got to get your dad on board because if your dad dies, and this was when he was at the end, his health is really bad. If your dad dies, we know who's coming in next. This is not going to happen. Yeah. And so there was another apostle named Alvin R. Dyer.
Okay, now here's what's so interesting. So Hugh B. Brown is a counselor in the presidency. Yes. Alvin R. Dyer is a counselor in the presidency. And then you have David O. McKay.
Yes.
Dyer and Brown are diametrically opposed to each other on this issue. And so they're both trying to undermine
Yes.
each other with President McKay on this issue. It's crazy.
It is wild. So Hubie Brown meets
T.C.
with McKay.
Christensen needs to do a movie about this.
It really could be. It really could be. So he meets with McKay's sons, tries to get them on board to go convince their dad. Dyer finds out that they're having a meeting at the Hotel Utah and goes to like intercept this meeting with McKay and his sons and Hubie Brown and like talk him out of it. And apparently he did.
Yeah.
Because it didn't happen.
Exactly.
And then, eventually we get to Kimball. And when we get to Kimball, Hubie Brown is late in life and he is on his deathbed. And President Kimball comes to visit him. And he just begs President Kimball, like his dying wish was
please
for
get
him
this priesthood ban lifted
to undo this.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this story, besides being so interesting, is so valuable to us as members. I think it is so important for us to see, because the church has, they've gone back on this. For many years, we had, even when the ban was lifted, there were things in our manuals that talked about this being a curse, and that's the reason. Or people have
or they even still said, even though the priesthood ban was lifted, don't interracially marry.
Right. And it up until very recently, this was still hanging out in some of our older manuals that were still available. It says up until 2010 and 2011, there were still church manuals that had this in it, that were online, available for people to get. So it's just lingered. And these theories about why it happened and why the Lord wasn't ready, I just think it is so important for us to see this behind the scenes and remember that these were people with biases.
Exactly.
And the church has changed their stance on that. They've not said that, this isn't a curse. They've backpedaled on that. They have a whole essay about it that they released.
It's a beautiful essay.
In 2013. So we know that, but they haven't formally apologized. And I just think that there's some lingering preconceived notions that we just need to just nip in the bud. And I think the more that we can just see the human aspect of this and remember that, yes, our prophet is a prophet of God and inspired, but also there is human bias here. And these guys couldn't agree. And there was,
everybody's colored by, and everybody's colored by their life experiences and their own perceptions. And I think you filter the spirit through your life experiences and your own perceptions. Heavenly Father cannot tell you something that, you lack the capacity to, understand or accept. The Spirit has to work on you just a little bit at a time until you kind of think of it in a new way or have a new understanding.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think the more we can get of this behind the scenes, what really happened, the more we remember that this was not great. Yeah. And it's a yucky part of our history and we just need to own it and do better.
Exactly.
So, okay. Anyway, it was really interesting though, the dynamics, because we just never get a peek into that ever.
And this is a real good peek into the dynamics. There's a whole section that we didn't even talk about how, once the ban was lifted and members of the 12 were talking, they were saying things about how the revelation came about that President Kimball took exception with and said, I don't really think it happened that way.
Interesting.
And so that was interesting too.
Yes. Packer and McConkie.
Yes.
They were kind of embellishing the story.
They were embellishing the story.
We heard a voice.
They were taking the L. Tom Perry approach.
So interesting.
Or no, not L. Tom Perry. Who was the one that had all the baseball stories?
Cook. Was it Cook?
No,
not Cook. No, current Cook. The older.
No, it wasn't L. Tom Perry. So I did not mean to disparage L. Tom Perry.
One of them.
There was a one growing up that had all the baseball stories that we subsequently came out that weren't they were very much embellished.
I can't remember
either. Anyway. All right, we had better move on.
Okay.
So I'll make this next one pretty quick. There is a press release on Salt Lake Temple renovation updates, and Of course, like my yard, the Salt Lake Temple is taking longer than they originally planned. They are moving along, but it looks like it's going to be 2026. So it closed in December 2019. It's supposed to be done sometime in 2026. This is fascinating. I did not realize that on the north side of the temple, they are going to have a 300,000 square foot multi-level north addition. And it's going to have one baptistry, or it's going to have two baptistries, 21 ceiling rooms. And much of it is going to be below ground, so it doesn't mar the beauty of the temple. But I knew they were doing these additions. I didn't realize that they were 300,000 feet, because that's a lot. So
Yeah, that's a lot of square footage.
anyway, we're moving along.
Okay, next article. This is out of the Daily Universe from BYU. It is about the life of an FSY counselor.
I picked this one for her because she was an
It's for me
EFY
too,
counselor.
Because I was an EFY counselor for one summer back in the day, and this article just so many memories. So many memories. Anyway,
Hopefully not PTSD.
no, I actually
good.
loved it, but so funny. They just interviewed some counselors. They talked about like, why do you do it? What's it like? One guy said, you're basically babysitting 20 teenagers, just hoping they'll have a good experience. And then it always exceeds my expectation of how much they change. And then they talked about, what's the incentive? They get paid currently $800 per week. And obviously free food and free housing. I will say that has gone up quite a bit from my day.
You did not get $800.
I believe I was making about $460
a month,
a week.
a week. Oh, okay.
It was in the 400s.
Okay.
450, 460,
Okay.
which at the time was
Seemed like a
I was
lot.
like, that's a lot of money. So,
Especially considering I don't have to feed myself or
yes.
pay rent.
Yes. Anyway, it was just funny. Some of the stories they talked about. They talked about how exhausting it is emotionally, spiritually, physically. Yes, I can attest to that. I was exhausted. They talked about, this was really interesting because my 14-year-old just got back from FSY last week. They talked about some of the rules they have to enforce. The counselors in this article said that they used to have a rule of 3 until this year, where a counselor had to go everywhere with you. But this year you just have to check in and out with a counselor. And there's lights out at 11. And sometimes the kids get frustrated with the rules. I will say my daughter was very frustrated with the rules. And so
What rules frustrated her?
she got back last week and she was at Boise State. This is
Okay.
our first time with my kids going at Boise
Okay.
State. And they were not allowed to go anywhere without a counselor.
Oh.
They could not go to the bathroom. During their free time, they could not go around campus unless their counselor took them somewhere.
Okay.
They were not allowed to go to the student union and shop at the stores and go get Chick-fil-A or whatever. She said she was walking down her hall to go to the bathroom during free time. And they're like, where are you going? Where are you going? So they did not let them go anywhere without a counselor present. Even to the bathroom during class.
So how do you do that if you've got 20 kids you're managing?
I don't know.
Okay, all 20 girls, we're going to move to the bathroom now.
I don't know. And I'm trying to figure out if this is a Boise State rule. My theory is this is a BSU rule.
Okay.
Because when my older daughter went to University of Idaho a couple of years ago, it was not like that. On their free time, they could roam around. So I wonder if this is different schools have different rules for liability purposes.
Either that, or maybe there were more Boise State students around and they wanted to make sure that the kids were with the kids and weren't interacting with some of the college students.
I don't know. My older daughter's going to FSY at BYU later this summer. So we'll see if it's different
that'll
there.
be very interesting.
I will say, even with this counselor's following rule, 14 boys got stuck in an elevator and 5 fire trucks had to come to rescue them.
Okay, no, I had not heard that story.
That was all the excitement last week at FSY. My daughter was sending me pictures look, Mom, the fire department's here. Apparently somebody decided to jump in the elevator, as you do when you're a 14-year-old boy. And there were 14 of them in there. And she said they could hear him screaming, help!
Oh, that's going to cost somebody.
So we'll see if Boise State invites us back next year. But anyway, I thought this was funny. This one quote said, I feel like there are 2 extremes with FSY counselors. Those who are the fun ones leading the dances and helping the kids, and the other extreme, which is hyper focused on the spiritual stuff.
It's very true.
Anyway, it's so funny. Anyway, it was just a funny article. They talked about like, interactions with counselors and the dynamics of that. And it was funny. Actually, as I was reading the article, I was like, this will be a really fun, like, reality show only for Mormons. Nobody else would be into it.
The BYU channel would have to do that.
Yeah.
Very true. All right. We had a couple of church buildings that were vandalized, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
So the first one was in Brentwood, California. Somebody had taken spray paint and they wrote on the building, LDS invests in genocide. Your tithes take lives.
Yes. And then they listed some companies
Yes.
that they do not think we should be investing.
Exactly.
Like Amazon, Google, JP Morgan.
Exactly.
Etc.
And so the Brentwood Police Department is currently investigating that. They have not classified it as a hate crime as of yet. And then the funniest one we had happened in Wisconsin. There was an errant deer in Wisconsin. Deer, as in the animal. D-E-E-R. It apparently wanted some spirituality because it jumped through a glass window in a church building.
I think someone should check on that deer. Something is wrong. You don't jump through a window.
So it jumps.
This is not normal.
No. So it jumps through this glass window into this church building, and then it's roaming around the church building because it can't get out. And so this happened in Viroqua, Wisconsin, and their police department had a very good attitude about it. They had a little post. I don't know if it was, I think it was on Facebook, and they wrote, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had an unexpected parishioner this morning. With the help from the Viroqua Police Department, the deer was able to get back outside. The deer appeared uninjured and is now cleansed of its sins. A gentle reminder that all visitors are welcome."
I love that. So funny.
I thought that was funny.
I can't believe the deer wasn't injured.
I know. I can't believe it either. Because, I mean, those church windows they seem rather substantial to me.
I think so. I don't know. It sounds like something from an apocalypse movie where like the animals start to go crazy. I just think someone should check on the deer there. What is happening?
Who knows? Okay, well, we are now finished with our news. We are going to move on to Mormons behaving badly. Or this week, my first story is actually a Mormon who was thought to be behaving badly, but really wasn't behaving badly.
This was a good update.
Because
we did not get full details when this story first came out.
No, this story first came out that a stake president in the Pennsylvania area had been arrested and charged with a felony for failing to report child abuse. Well, those charges were subsequently dropped, and when he was arrested, the church actually said, there has been a big misunderstanding here, and we will defend him with all of our big dollars. And so they hired a lawyer and everything for him. So which
typically when this happens, I go,
I know, I do typically too. I'm like, So first of all, Pennsylvania is not a mandatory reporter state. So if you learn something in a confession, you are not mandatorily required to report it. So he learned of abuse more than 20 years after it happened. So this was not at the time that it was going on. And he learned of it from two ways. First of all, he had a confession by the individual who was subsequently charged with the abuse, and his name was Sean Corey Gooden. And Brother Gooden told him the name of the individual that he abused. And so the stake president reached out to that victim and said, hey, I had this confession, can I talk to you, help you, etc. And he reached out to the victim, and the victim is now an adult. And the victim said, hey, I would like to keep this matter confidential. Mm-hmm. So the stake president immediately consulted with legal counsel, and legal counsel said, under the circumstances, a report to law enforcement was not required, and that he could honor the adult victim's request and not make a report. Well, he continued to work with this adult victim, and he actually encouraged the adult victim to go to law enforcement. The adult victim subsequently went to law enforcement, told law enforcement what happened. Sean Corey Gooden was subsequently charged with the crime, and then the stake president gets charged with failure to report. Well, the district attorney, in looking at the situation, also in consulting with the victim in this case, who was very adamant of, please withdraw these charges. I do not want the stake president charged. That is not what this was about. And so they subsequently dismissed the case. So that was actually a good thing.
Yeah, I think it was the right call.
Now, for a Mormon who actually was behaving badly. We're gonna revisit Chad Daybell because we have to. First of all, last time we recorded, the jury
that was right before the sentencing.
Exactly, the jury was still deliberating, and I was distressed. They had not returned that verdict yet. We recorded on a Friday night. They deliberated about 2 more hours on Saturday morning. I've listened to a couple juror interviews, and sure enough, they said we needed to sleep on it overnight, which is kind of what I had kind of thought was going on. They did return a verdict finding that he should have the death penalty imposed upon him, and the judge did impose that on him. So he is the 9th person in Idaho who is now sitting on death row. Within, I think, about 48 hours of that verdict coming down, he was transferred from the county jail out to death row, and the prison is located just kind of south of Boise. So I got a little intel on what his church life is like there on death row.
Well, I need to hear about this.
So
I've heard they have church services out there.
they do. So
Because I think they used to have a rotation where people would go out and speak. And I think
exactly.
my husband went once with
Yes.
another guy from our ward.
Exactly. So they have a bishop who has been assigned out there, and
Okay.
his name is Bishop Wrigley, I believe. And he's actually been the bishop out there for 10 years.
Oh, that's a
he's
long
been
time.
a long time. He clearly loves this calling and working with the prisoners. Anyway, for scheduling reasons with the prison, they have to have church on Sunday. Now, being on death row, Chad will not be eligible to go to church on Sunday.
You're like isolated?
You're isolated.
Okay.
He is in his cell 23 hours a day. He gets out for 1 hour a day.
Wow.
And I do not believe that he gets to go to church.
Okay.
Now, what he can have is he can request that Bishop Ridley come and visit him.
Okay.
So, Chad, of course, has been excommunicated, and there are many individuals out there who do attend church services who have been excommunicated. So that's not a big deal. Now, I don't believe Bishop Ridley will be reaching out to Chad saying, "Hey, heard you were a former member. You want to talk to me?" But if Chad were to say, "I would like to have an LDS bishop come and visit him," Bishop Ridley is one of the few people that would be allowed an in-person visit with Chad Daybell. So
interesting.
Would that not be very interesting?
That would be interesting.
I need to cozy up. I don't know
sure
Bishop
we'll
Ridley,
never know.
but I need to cozy up to him. I really want to know. Does Chad Daybell want to see you on death row?
I'm sure we will never, ever have that information.
I know.
But
I know.
it is interesting to think about.
Well, unless, of course, they put him to death, because they all get to have their spiritual advisor with them in the last few moments before they're put to death. Now, I don't know if Chad feels he's so far removed from the LDS Church at this point in time that he's not per se interested in that, or if he still considers himself to be a member of the church, because he also kind of said, "I started my own church, the Church of the Firstborn."
Yeah, I was going to say he's kind of his own spiritual advisor.
Exactly. So anyway, but I thought that was very interesting to see, what kind of contact might Chad Daybell have with members of the church while he's incarcerated.
Not much.
Not much. Okay. So before we move on to our favorite things, I need to thank our sponsor tonight. We, of course, this year are sponsored by Postum. Now, we had hoped to have some sort of a baked good tonight.
I was supposed to do that, but I got busy.
Exactly. And I was extremely busy too. So we do not have a Postum drink tonight, and we do not have a Postum baked good. But it is our goal next month when we record. Hopefully we will have a Postum baked good to try on the air and share. But we do want to thank our sponsor Postum for sponsoring us. And we're having, at least you and I are having a lot of fun this year trying out different things with the Postum and kind of getting acquainted with Postum.
Yes. You know who loves that iced Postum? My 14-year-old.
Really?
She can't get enough of it.
Oh, dang. Who knew?
I know.
She just mixes. She
just whips it up.
Dang.
She has the recipe memorized.
Cruises around the house with her ice Postum.
Yes.
Good for her. All right. So before we talk about our individual favorite things, I did bring something fun for us to try tonight. So for Mother's Day, my son gave me these things. They're called Tony's Chocolonely. I have never tried these before. So, I thought that it would be very fun, and he gave me a bag. They're called Tinies, and they have all of the different flavors that Tony's has. And I know you have tried.
I have
Tony's
tried them.
before.
I think they're delicious. It's like fancy chocolate.
Okay, so
This is not your Hershey's chocolate. This is fancy chocolate.
Yes. So I have never tried them. Now you said you like the
My
orange.
favorite is the orange, which has like toffee bits in it.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, let's see if we can find. There's an orange one for you.
Oh, thank you.
Let's split it so I can try it too.
Okay.
Because I don't know if I have another orange one in here.
Yeah, this orange is salted chocolate caramel sea salt.
Okay.
Milk chocolate. This one's my favorite.
Okay.
But I like milk chocolate.
Let's see.
There you go.
Okay, maybe we'll just try the orange for right now. I like milk chocolate and orange.
So it has toffee bits and like sea salt. It's really good.
That is really good.
But I don't know if I've tried all these other flavors. I've tried a few flavors.
The other flavors that come in the variety pack are just a regular milk chocolate, which is the red. The orange was the orange milk chocolate caramel sea salt. Then the yellow is milk chocolate honey almond nougat.
Oh, I've never tried that one.
Okay, then the green is dark chocolate almond with sea salt. The blue is dark chocolate 70%. Oh, I'm going to have to share that with my husband. I'm not a big dark chocolate fan, but he loves that. And then the purple is dark milk chocolate pretzel toffee.
Oh, I don't think I've tried that one either.
Okay, so anyway, those are good. I like the variety pack because you can try all sorts of different stuff. So, okay, kudos to my son Isaac for giving me these for Mother's Day.
Okay.
That was a fun try.
Yay.
Okay.
Move
on to your favorite thing.
My favorite thing for the month is something I bought my husband for Christmas, and I have officially taken ownership.
So there's anything wrong with that?
That worked out really well for me.
Yeah.
And this is just a chair, like fold out camping chair, I guess. I don't know. It's not.
Okay.
It's kind of a hybrid between a camping chair and a
beach chair.
Kind of.
Okay.
It rocks. It is a rocking chair, camping chair.
Oh.
So it's lightweight, folds out, and it rocks.
Oh.
So I thought, he will really like this because I have always been, I'm not picky about my chair. I just grab a cheap beach chair, like when we go to sporting events and when I'm a soccer mom. But he always likes a bigger, nicer, like camping chair. And so I'm like, I'm going to get him the one that rocks because I have a friend that has it and she loves it. So I got it for him for Christmas. I don't know if he's used it once because he coaches soccer and I'm the soccer mom.
So you take it and watch him coach and watch the kids play.
I used it all soccer season. And now this summer, I just keep it in the back of my car. And when I take my little kids to the park, which is like almost every day, I no longer sit on the hard park bench. I'm bougie now. I sit on my chair.
Dang.
Every park I go to, I sling my chair over.
Okay.
And we walk and I set up my chair wherever I want, whatever shade I want. I don't do park benches anymore.
Dang.
I'm beyond that.
Okay.
I'm too old for that.
All right. Well, you are going to have to send me the link for this.
Rocking.
And then I will put it on our Twin Sisters Instagram so people can see what it looks like and know where to get it.
Rocking camping chair.
Okay.
Highly recommend.
All right.
All right. What's your favorite?
Okay. So my favorite thing, I've been sipping on it all night tonight. I'm going to hold it up here. This is mug root beer, and it is 0 sugar.
I'm so excited about this. I did not know this existed until you walked into my house with it.
I know.
I was like, what?
Ariane and I grew up on mug root beer. It was like the favorite thing that our dad loved. I can in a root beer taste test, boom, just like that. I could pick out the mug root beer. I drank so much of it as a kid. I do not like diet root beer, and neither do you.
No,
they never.
The aftertaste is not good.
They never have a good flavor. Mm-hmm. So my son Isaac, the same one who gave me the yummy chocolate, comes cruising home from the store with the 0 sugar mug
He's
root
a good
beer.
Finder.
He is a very good finder. And so Darren and I tried it and we were like, holy cow, that is so good. it was really hard to find for a long time. I think it's so popular that it's just like off. Well, there weren't very many stores that were carrying it here locally in Boise. And, but now it's becoming more and more popular. So it's a little bit easier to find. You tried it tonight and you were duly impressed.
Great. I am going on the hunt for this.
Well, and I told you that I found it at Walmart. And so you were like, yeah, next time I do a Walmart pickup, I'm going to have them throw in a 12-pack of the Mug Zero.
It was good.
So yes, that's my favorite thing tonight is the Mug Zero. I have a feeling it will phase out all other diet root beers.
Yeah.
Because diet root beer is
nasty.
nasty.
And then A&W will have to come up with an A&W Zero.
Exactly.
Which I do like A&W root beer too.
Oh, I did not know that about you.
We did a taste test and I liked it just as much.
So you are a traitor to the Mug root beer and our father. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us tonight. You want to stick around and do a Patreon segment with me?
Yeah.
Okay. We have some fun sports stories for our Patreon segment.
So many sports stories.
So we're gonna do sports in the Patreon segment.
Yay, sports!
Yay! But until then, so if you want to be a Patreon subscriber, you can get our extra content. You can throw $2-3 a month at TWIM. Show us the love. Keep our equipment going. If you have any comments, you can reach out at contact@thisweekinmormons.com. You can, of course, find the TWIM sisters on Instagram. TWIM is on Instagram. And our Facebook. Our Facebook's been pretty active recently.
Oh, you've been getting it up and running again.
I have been posting a lot of stories on Facebook. I kind of figured, well, I'm on there every day on Facebook. I might as well, throw down a couple stories. So you can find us in all of those places, and we appreciate your listening, and have a good evening.